My mom is a huge Harry Potter nut. She and my dad actually met in a Harry Potter IRC, like Discord but for old people. In the early aughts got married, had kids, and from day one decided to embarrass us for life by naming us after some Harry Potter and Star Wars characters. It's honestly been hell. I have a stupid name, and since we were little my parents have forced stuff like Harry Potter, Star Wars, Marvel movies, etc. down our throats. Everything is about dragons and magic and blah blah blah. I'm so sick of it. Every birthday, every holiday, everything is just organized around fandom. So just like every Christmas, the days leading up to Christmas we have to sit down every night and watch Harry Potter movies. I can usually get away with knitting or drawing on my iPad during this, but this year my mom was like, let's just have a technology and distraction-free night every night. I arranged to go over to my friend Missy's house instead for like 2 nights. Missy's family is normal and likes things a normal amount. My mom got really mad and started talking about how it's a family tradition and how I'm basically rejecting her, and went on her whole thing about how you wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Harry Potter. I finally had it and just yelled, I don't like Harry Potter. I don't like Star Wars. I couldn't help it. I started crying because I was just so frustrated, because everything always has to be about Harry Potter, this, Star Wars, that, and now that we're all older they started doing Game of Thrones. Everything is centered around some kind of movie or TV show or book series. Just once as I want my family to band around something that doesn't have to do with media or these nerdy things. We live in Utah where we have like 5 national parks, and even though I ask every year for my birthday, well, my sister called me saying that mom was angry and to just come home and to stop with the theatrics. I told her that I'm sick of having all this old nerd stuff crammed down my throat, and just once I want to have a normal time watching normal Christmas movies and not having to pause for lightsaber battles. I met her 2 years ago when we worked together and quickly became very close. She helped me through the darkest times of my life. I was mid-split with an abusive ex when we met, and I helped her through some really tough and unimaginable things. There were lots of rumors at the time we were seeing each other, and everyone assumed we were an item. But for the past 2 years our relationship has been purely platonic. She was my best friend, and up until a few weeks back I don't think we'd even ever hugged. Fast forward to a week ago, she came over for dinner and wine. This is very common and normal. We had more than usual and she was over the limit, so couldn't drive, so she stayed the night. We slept in the same bed but apart, and no physical contact again. It was completely normal and just as expected. We somehow didn't get up and ended up staying in bed until 10 p.m. the next day just talking. Sometime during that evening she got upset about something going on in her life. I rubbed her back while telling her everything will be okay, and then we just cuddled. Probably the first bit of real physical contact between us, but nothing was sexual. Didn't feel weird, and she went home and it was all okay. This last weekend we had a hiking holiday planned, where we'd be sleeping in her van. She has a converted Transit. It's 1 bed, but we thought we'd be fine. First night it was freezing, ending up cuddling and spooning, but again didn't feel sexual. Second night is where it all went a bit wrong. We drank a bit too much and the spoon ended up getting carried away. It seems to be a joint thing, and before I knew it we were kissing and touching each other everywhere. It was a bit of a frenzy of this for about 15 minutes until we both stopped and realized what we just did. After this we spoke a little and asked if either of us regretted it. We both said we didn't, but it was odd. She got upset and I told her it was okay. It didn't change anything and we could just draw a line under it. We woke up the next morning and it happened again. We didn't talk too much but then went for a walk, and then just before we headed home we ended up all over each other again. We were completely naked but again stopped, cuddled and lay there. We both agreed it was a what happens in X, stays in X type event. It was a really long trip home, 6 hours plus. During this she would rest her head on my hand on lap ECT, and it seemed very different to our usual dynamic. When we stopped at services for breaks we seemed to walk arm in arm. We kept kissing on and off, but it seemed strangely normal. We arrived back at her home. She lives with her dad at the moment, but just before I left she kissed me again and thanked me for a wonderful weekend. The following day she came over to get some stuff I took home with me. We end up just cuddling, kissing, feeling and so on again, but she has dinner with a friend and we stop it there. She goes on her way. This should feel really weird and strange, but it felt completely normal, and we both discussed it that it was so odd it felt normal. Yesterday she turned up unannounced at my place, which is not a normal thing. With coffee and donuts, we end up talking, cuddling, kissing again, and then we end up talking about what this is, the big problem. Neither of us were sure. She got panicky and burst out in tears and left. She said she was really scared, and her words were, "I think I will end up pushing you away and hurting you, and I don't want to do that to you." I told her I would come and see her later and talk. I drove to her house, but her ex was there, another slight issue. They broke up 6 years ago, stayed close friends. He is a lovely bloke, but in his head he is certain they will get married and have children. She's had the conversation with him, but he seems to shut it off. If he found out she was seeing anyone, he would get extremely angry. But there's so much family history intertwined between the both, it's really complicated. For that reason she has avoided seeing anyone in the past 6 years. The reason he turned up is she hadn't responded to him since the night we kissed. I went home when I saw his car and just said she could come to mine to chat later. She turned up, sad and very emotional. She explained she ran off because she is terrified of losing our friendship. I said let's just cut the romance out, draw a line under it and be friends again, but she seemed to not speak much when I said this. I asked if her ex was the issue. She said it was nothing to do with us, but a whole other issue. But that was not impacting what was going on between us. We sat quietly, hugged, and I tried to reassure it would be okay, and I wasn't going to start hating her for whatever reason. And I am completely fine with just being platonic friends again. We both agree and say whatever happens we stay friends and nobody gets hurt, but we will pull back from the more physical side. I woke up this morning really panicky. I have no idea where we are, where we stand, and absolutely terrified of losing our friendship. I don't know what to do or say. I felt sick to my stomach and can't eat at the thought of this. She is coming around later to collect some of her clothes she left last night, and I am thinking I need a plan of what to say / do. I cannot lose my best friend. She is absolutely everything to me, but I am worried we crossed a line and there's only one eventual outcome, which won't be good. My boyfriend and I have been together for 2 years now. Every year at the end of summer, my boyfriend's family has a beach trip. They have a cute cottage that they go to visit a few times a year. Last year I was unable to join, but this year I was able to make it. I've met his family before many times and we get along well, so I was looking forward to it. While I was packing, I was sure to include nicer dresses in case we went out, and even included a more modest bikini than I would usually wear. This one is still a bikini, but is full coverage unlike my others. I know his family can be a little more conservative, so I kept that in mind when packing. I even went over everything I packed with my boyfriend. On the trip was my BF and I, his younger brother, his older brother, his sister-in-law, and his parents. The first day went by really well. Our flight didn't have any issues. We unpacked, got settled, and all went out for dinner. The next day we had planned to go out on the boat. So I put on my bikini and had a cover up. No one said anything to me as we were leaving, or even when we were on the boat. I spent the whole day in my bikini without a single comment. It wasn't until that night I realized people had an issue with it. We were all drinking on the boat, with the exception of my BF's sister-in-law because she's pregnant. And we continued drinking when we got back. So after dinner, we were all pretty wasted. When we were talking about our time on the boat, my BF's dad made a comment about how everyone was staring at me because of my slutty bikini. I was embarrassed and just laughed it off, but then everyone else chimed in to comment on it. His mom laughed and said it was fine, that she would wear nothing if she were young again. But then his younger brother said that I basically was wearing nothing. I defended myself and said it was the most conservative suit I had. And then his older brother said that it didn't leave anything to the imagination. And that if he were single, he would have tried to steal me away. That comment made me pretty uncomfortable, and I could tell it made his wife uncomfortable too. I asked if she would wear bikinis on the trip, and my BF's dad interrupted and said that she did, but it was different. My BF just laughed along with all of this, didn't even see anything wrong with it. When I told him to say something, he said that I did look like I was trying to get dick down. Well, that comment was the last straw. I went to our room. I wanted to leave early after all that. But we only had a few days, so I just pushed it in the back of my mind and kept to myself the rest of our trip. I know they were just joking, but what they said really bothered me and made me feel uncomfortable. I'm not sure why my BF doesn't get that. He just keeps saying that they were joking around. But it obviously wasn't very funny to me, so now he's saying I ruined the trip by moping around the rest of the time. I am a 39 years old male, and I lost my son in 2019 due to a chronic heart condition. He was 15 years old. It was devastating, and I just couldn't take it, especially when my family did little to nothing to support me during these difficult times. They didn't bring my son meals when he was at the hospital. They didn't let me go home and rest even for a few hours. They didn't take care of other things while I had a lot to deal with. I wasn't offered any help, just words. They'd just talk but do nothing. Despite the struggle, I've created an account for my son's college fund and kept putting whatever I could get at the time, and my son would talk about that a lot. He was depressed but always believed that he was going to get better and continue his education and attend college. I started saving money to keep him motivated and to make him feel like he could be like any other kid with hopes for a good future. He had a very close friend that's about the same age as him. They were friends for 5 years, and I can't express how his presence in my son's life helped him through the worst days. Sometimes his friend would spend the night with us and try to get my son to do activities and lighten up his mood all the time. To be frank, his friend was closer to him than his own family. He never stopped visiting and asking how I'm doing after my son's death. He'd show me handmade projects he made for my son and as a way to remember him, and we'd sometimes just sit and talk together or cry together. Last week, while I was with my family, my sister asked me what I was going to do with my son's college money. I didn't want to mention this, but since she asked, I told her that I will be giving the money to my son's friend. She barely even recognized his friend and was confused and said that my nephew deserves this money since he's family. My mom agreed that I wasn't thinking straight and that I should help the people close to me, family, and that my nephew has a right to go to college, and I was wrong for giving this opportunity away to someone else. I didn't know what to say. They kept pointing out that I was making a mistake and how my nephew will resent me if he finds out. Thing is, my nephew wasn't close to my son. I don't even know why he'd be bothered. My sister went on about not being able to afford my nephew's college. I told her this was my decision, and I felt more comfortable that way. She started lashing out, constantly texting me, constantly wanting to talk to me, and ending up arguing. When I snapped, she had my mom calling me, basically guilt-tripping me and telling me I'm wrong and that I needed to think about this. It's just too much pressure, and I'm feeling lost and unable to figure out how to deal with this.